depend on Mary Ann. We're in the same group, but she can't keep me out of the doghouse, and I'm in again. That's why I'm here by myself today. My wife said she wanted to go out to eat, and I said, "Where do you want to go?" And she said, "I want to go to one of those places where they make your food in front of you." And so I took her to Subway, and that's when the fight started. Well, I just say today is going to be it's a good news briefing. It really is. So I'm here to talk about Fisher House, but you get a couple of bonuses. I want to tell you what's going on with the VA here, and if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them as best I can. Remember, I'm a volunteer. I'm not still employed. Well, I do get a paycheck, but it's a retiree's paycheck. I just want to tell you a little bit about the Fisher House. And today there's 91 Fisher houses, and there's another one that's going to open in Kansas City. Actually, it's going to open the 7th of October, but with the surge in COVID, we're going to postpone the grand opening ceremony until early next year when that dies off. And then in Columbia, Missouri, we're planning to start construction on one next year, in the middle of the year. So a year after that, it will be open also. And about half of the Fisher houses are on military installations, and the other half are on VA campuses. So what is a Fisher house? Well, the Fisher house is very much like a Ronald McDonald house, except it's for the families of hospitalized veterans and military. And when those families come here to stay, they stay absolutely free of charge. There's no charge for anything. And they can stay for as long as their veteran is hospitalized, whether that's measured in days, weeks, or months. And Jan, if we need some personal stories, you've met enough of our guests down at the Fisher House. I'm sure that we could talk a long time about that. Well, how do you build a Fisher House? There are a lot of restrictions when you try to use federal money for anything in construction. So the way we build a Fisher House is once the medical center defines a need, and then they'll compete against other medical centers that want a Fisher House also. And then they will donate the property on the VA grounds to the Fisher House Foundation. And then the Fisher House Foundation will raise money nationally, and our local board will raise it locally, and we send it to the foundation. And then the foundation will build the house on VA property. And when it's finished, constructed, furnished, then we'll have a ceremony, and they will then give that Fisher House to the VA. So the house, when it's finished, actually is owned by the VA. And the VA provides the utility, maintenance, management, and housekeeping, with the promise that they will keep that house in the same pristine condition as opening day for as long as they have it. And that's a pretty powerful message when you put the criteria on there, a same pristine condition as opening day. And we really do try to live up to that. So then at that point, the VA Medical Center will own the Fisher House, but we still have a board and we support it. So we raised money for things that the VA cannot provide. Like the VA cannot buy food, and we never turn anybody away. If the family is eligible to stay in the Fisher House and the house is full, then we'll put them up in a hotel until there is room in the Fisher House. And so all the meals are provided, and we have wonderful volunteers like Jan that come in, fix meals, bake cookies. The list is just endless of what they do. But the bottom line is we do whatever it takes to take care of the families. So the question is, why would we build one here in St. Louis? What you may not know about the VA here in St. Louis is that we draw veterans from all across the central Midwest. The VA Medical Center will have its own what we call catchment area, which is eastern Missouri, southern Illinois. But we also have two other small VA medical centers. One's down Poplar Bluff, and the other one is in Marion, Illinois. And these are relatively small hospitals. They can take care of the day-to-day things, but if you happen to need heart surgery or a lung transplant or radiation oncology, you have to go to the big city or here in St. Louis to the big VA. So we get veterans that come from Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Western Kentucky, and Northern Arkansas that all come in here. And so the criteria to stay in the Fisher House is pretty simple. It's not based on your income. It's just simply that you're there to care for your veteran and you come from outside of a 50-mile range. And the reason for that is historically we've just found that people that live within a 50-mile range find it more convenient just to drive each day back and forth. But there's always exceptions, and the bottom line is do whatever it takes to take care of the veteran's family. Pardon me. So we do not take veterans by themselves to stay in the Fisher House. And that's true whether it's in the military or the VA. The family member has to be there. Who's a family member? It can be spouse, can be children, can be siblings, can even be grandchildren, and in many cases, like for our spinal cord injury patients, it's the caregiver that can stay there in the Fisher House. And like I say, it's free. Everything is free. There's no charge for anything, and in fact, we discourage our guests from even making donations to the Fisher House. So what do we do as a board? Well, we're a bunch of cheap-ass volunteers. we don't charge anything. So we're there to raise money. We raised that money to build the house, and then we turned it over to the VA, and so we support the needs. The needs are like when we have overflow hotel rooms that are needed, or many people that come here from rural Missouri, their worst nightmare is driving in St. Louis. Well, for some of us that live here too, it's not too great. But they, whatever they need. For example, if their veteran is hospitalized downtown at the John Cochran VA Medical Center, and they're in the ICU, they may not want to leave when the shuttle bus stops at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so if they don't have transportation, then we'll pay for transportation to get them back to the Fisher House or on the weekends to get them back and forth to the hospital. So, is it a success? Well, let's measure it against what happened before we had this. Down at Jefferson Barracks, which is the long-term care campus, it was not uncommon to have wives that were living in their cars and vans in the parking lot. Or downtown, whole families camped out in the lobbies and waiting rooms. And as hard as that is, that's what was going on all across the VA. And so the Fisher House just solved all of those problems. They had a place to live. And we actually opened the house in 2010, and since that time we've had over 12,000 guests that have stayed in the Fisher House. And their savings in food and lodging cost has been over $13 million, which they could not have afforded. So it's just been a wonderful addition. Let me show you a picture of the Fisher House. And this is what it looks like. It's down at Jefferson Barracks. The blue that you see in the background is the Mississippi River, and it's in a beautiful location. People congratulate me on that, but that wasn't my idea to put it here. I was going for the cheaper alternative, but I have to admit, this was the perfect place to do it. It's just a very quiet location that overlooks the Mississippi River. And so this house has 20 bedroom suites, so we can accommodate up to 40 guests a day. And normally, non-COVID times, we run or have an average of about a 95% occupancy rate. Actually, sometimes it's much higher than that, because if we have overflow, we put them up in a hotel, either over in Columbia, Illinois, because that's closer for driving, or if they're downtown at John Cochran, then we put them up in a hotel downtown. During COVID, what happened, Jan, you'd be interested in this. We had long-term guests, and when I say long-term, people that were there for more than 3 days. But we had, for example, a lot of double lung transplants. And people come in for that from Indiana to Kansas to Iowa to Nebraska. And that's done by BJC, under contract with the VA. And if you have a double lung transplant, you're in the hospital for 3 to 5 days. But you have to be at the hospital every day for 90 days to go through respiration therapy and physical therapy to make sure that the lungs are accepted by your body. We put up the long-term guests. So for those that were going to be here 3 days or less, we put them up in the Drury Hotel downtown at our board's expense. Because the manager said if they're going to be there for a long time, I can make sure everybody follows the COVID protocols and I can keep them safe. But people that are rotating in and out, I'm not sure that I can maintain that. So we put them up in a hotel. We provided meals for them. And since all of this started, we have not had a single guest that's come down with COVID since we started this. You know, initially when we started, many of the other Fisher houses had a requirement you had to have a minimum stay of 3 days. But we found out that we had a lot of older guests in central Missouri or northern Arkansas that were getting up like 3:30 in the morning, driving up here, having 1 or 2 outpatient visits, and then driving home. And I know when you have hair this color right here, that's a hell of a long day, and it's not safe. And so we made a policy that if you were coming up here for an outpatient visit and you were eligible to stay in the Fisher house, meaning coming from outside of a 50-mile radius, that you could stay the night before or the night after in the Fisher house with your family. Oh, and by the way, when we have those double lung transplants and they have to be here for a long time, the patient has the option of being in the hospital or coming to the Fisher house if a family member is there. And I can tell you that if you have the choice of a hospital bed or a very luxurious bed or home-cooked meal instead of hospital food, guess which one they always take? They come visit with us in the Fisher house. Let me just set this over here. So Jan, you've actually seen some of these people here that come in. Some come in for an overnight stay. Some come in for 2 or 3 days if they're having like an outpatient surgery and they have to rest after that. But like this young man right here, his mother was in the Fisher house for 14 months. He was a young Marine who was injured in a terrible automobile accident in Joplin, Missouri. And so he came up. And the fact is, when he first came in, he didn't want to live. He thought life was over for him. And it took a long time to get him turned around, and probably the best medicine of all was talking to other members in the spinal cord injury unit that said, we started off just like you did, and we turned it around. So That's a Fisher House. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Jefferson Barracks campus. It was a huge campus. It was like 100 acres. And I have to get my bearings. This is where the Fisher House is located. And if you go to the north, this is the cemetery, the National Cemetery. And so a major construction project has been going on at Jefferson Barracks for the last several years. In fact, what we were doing is giving 30 additional acres to the cemetery, compressing the medical campus, giving the additional land to the cemetery, and that'll keep the cemetery open till about 2027. After that, you may have read in the paper, they have an agreement with the county to return Sylvan Springs Park, and with that would keep the cemetery open till 2050. So the campus has actually reduced, but we tore down 14 buildings and built 5 new ones that were huge new facilities. And let me tell you about one of those. I'd been out here for Veterans Day. Margaret invited me, and I came out and we talked about building a bowling alley out there. This is one of those new buildings, just completed actually the 1st of November of last year. It's called a Veterans Rehabilitation Building. And in the Veterans Rehabilitation Building, they have every adaptive sport that the VA has available to it. It's a beautiful facility, and when it opens up, I hope you'll come down and just take a look. But it has a therapy pool where we teach swimming, scuba diving, kayaking, aerobic training, weight training, bocce ball, half-court basketball, hand cycling, everything that the VA has available to it to restore your health. And one of the reasons for having all of this is adjacent to this building, we have a spinal cord injury unit. And when those people come over, they don't do exercise like you do. They need adaptive sports. And what is adaptive sports? Well, one of those was bowling. We've had a bowling alley on the Jefferson Barracks campus that had been there for 68 years. It was a 6-lane bowling alley, and it was used for rehabilitation, recovery, and recreation. Bowling was free to veteran patients, inpatient or outpatients, and it was manned by volunteers. But afterwards, if you take a close look at this picture, you'll see it was built in 1953, and it looks like when it was built in 1953. Matter of fact, we've had people that were taking pictures of old bowling alleys in the United States. And when they came out to take a picture of this one, I said, this must be the oldest one. He said, no, there's another one here in St. Louis, Saratoga Lanes, that's been here for 99 years. Well, we didn't match that one. But when we built that new Veterans Rehabilitation Building, which was about a $70 million project, there wasn't enough money in the budget to build out a bowling alley in the basement. We had space for a 4-lane bowling alley. And afterwards, if you'd come up and take a look, we just finished this. I think it was the 20th of June that we had the grand opening ceremony for the new 4-lane bowling alley. And everything is brand new except for the pin setters. But new lanes, new underground ball returns, new furniture, new shoes, new balls. Everything is new except we refurbished the pin setters and reused those. And that was about an $800,000 project, to be honest with you. Yeah, I didn't think it was that much when I started. But when you put everything together, what we got in value with this particular bowling alley, is it worth it? Well, let me explain how I got involved in this. When I was asked to help raise money to build this bowling alley, I thought, ooh, this is an easy one to solve. We'll just rent lanes at a commercial bowling alley about a mile from here, and veterans can go down and bowl when they like. They can even have a beer. By the way, we don't serve beer on the VA campus. We treat people that drink beer, but we don't serve it. So I thought, well, this will make it a lot nicer. But what I didn't realize is what they use bowling for. So when we have veterans that have a stroke or a spinal cord injury or a mass amputation, their first thought is, my life's over. I can never do the things I used to do. And so the rec therapists need to get them out of the bed and get them started on a return to an active lifestyle. And they start with bowling. Why? Everybody has bowled at some time in their life. Everybody understands the rules. It's a very simple game. And we use an adaptive bowling equipment also, which is a ramp, unlike what you see at a commercial bowling alley, and steerable balls. Based on how you put it on the ramp, you can make the ball go straight, turn left, turn right. And so they can teach paraplegics or quadriplegics how to bowl. And when I went down there, we had a veteran who lived in the state veterans home, but he lived to come out and go bowling on Wednesday afternoons. And due to MS, he was 100% paralyzed from the neck down. And so you think, well, how can he bowl? Well, they all have a volunteer with them. And he'd been doing this for 7 years, I think. And so he'd set the bowling ball on the ramp. And he'd have the volunteer set it exactly how he wanted it. And once he's satisfied, they had a plastic stick in a case just for him. And he would launch the ball like that. The reason I'm telling you that story is because that afternoon he bowled a 288 game. And I thought, if he can do that, then that's really something. So what happens is when these patients finally learn to bowl, then the rec therapists say, okay, you thought you couldn't do anything. We've taught you how to bowl. Now let us show you what else we can do. And so then there's the therapy pool, swimming, kayaking, scuba diving. And by the way, once a year, they take those patients down to Cozumel, whether they're paraplegic or quadriplegic, so that they can go scuba diving in the Caribbean. And then bocce ball, weight training, and they're all with volunteers to help them get back. And then, of course, we have a lot of outpatients that come in as part of their recreational and their health maintenance programs that take care of that. So that's what's going on at Jefferson Barracks. Downtown, we have a huge VA medical center down there. It's called John Cochran VA Medical Center. And the difference is that Jefferson Barracks is more long-term care. That's where we have the mental health facilities, the hospice, spinal cord injury, what we call the domiciliary, of where we take homeless veterans, and they go through about 6 months of where most of them have substance abuse problems, and we try to correct those. Then they go through job counseling, job training. They learn to live on their own with a very productive lifestyle. At downtown at John Cochran, that's what you see on TV. When you see House or some of the other TV programs about a hospital, it's just a mile a minute. And so we have a project on the books that will cost right now between $800 and $900 million. In June, the VA signed the contract to go through the concept design. And those results are due back the 22nd of September, just a couple of weeks from now. And that's where will all the pieces fit. Down at Jefferson Barracks, we had 100 acres to work with. Downtown, we had 10 acres to work with this facility right here. So the plan is to build a new 500,000 square foot, 11-story inpatient bed tower, along with a 1,200 car parking garage, utilities, research buildings. And hopefully after that, then we'll take out part of the old building and convert that into a very modern outpatient clinic. So you can't read all the words here, but what you see in blue right here is the current hospital. That's that big 10-story building on Grand Avenue. Matter of fact, this is Grand Avenue right here. And for a reference point, this gray spot right here is the Powell Symphony Hall. So when you see that and compare the rest of it here, anything in green, the VA has already purchased. There was an old consignment store located down here, and it was so ugly. I mean, it was ugly personified. And some people wanted to restore it to a nightclub like it was back in the 1920s. Fortunately, we had one of those summer storms here that tore off the roof, tore down the facade, and took care of that one. So pretty soon we'll start on the demolition of this, and the only thing remaining here is a restaurant called Sweetie Pies, if you're familiar with it. And so we're still dealing with them. But the plan is to close off this street right here, and the new inpatient bed tower would be built in addition to the main hospital right here. And then this area up here is where all the new utilities will be, the research buildings. VA owns some of this property. This is where the new parking garage will be. And there's 6 houses in here, which we haven't purchased yet. And I hope that that will come soon. But June of this year is when we started with the concept design. The next step is called schematic design, where you'll actually lay out the rooms that you're going to have in the buildings. And that will take probably a year. And when that's finished, that will be at the 35% design. And then they'll go into the detailed design of where, if it's a doctor's office, what furniture goes in there. That whole design process will probably take about 3 years, but they'll start building parts of this to like the parking garage. The utilities have to be in before you can construct the buildings in there. So I would say by 2028, we hope to have that done. Well, if we're building all of this, we're going to have more veterans with more serious medical issues coming from a further distance here. And so we want to build a second Fisher House down here on this campus. Whereas our current house is 20 bedroom suites that can accommodate 40 guests, this one would be 16 bedroom suites where we could accommodate up to 32. And we think that would take care of all the needs that we have. So it's a big job. Our board has to raise enough money to pay for a new Fisher House. By the time we build that in the 2027, 2028 time frame, the cost will be about $8 million. The National Fisher House Foundation puts up half the money, and they ask us to raise the other half, which is $4 million. And so we've already got about $2 million in the bank to help pay for our share. So between now and 2028, we've got to raise another $2 million. We'll figure out how to do that. So with that, I'll take any questions anybody's got. Yeah?
Who is Fisher? The house was named that.
I'll tell you what, Zachary Fisher started out life in New York City as a 16-year-old bricklayer. He was the son of Lithuanian Jewish immigrants. Father was a mason. He taught his 3 sons masonry work, and so Zachary was a bricklayer, and he was injured in a terrible accident. Damaged his leg, so he could never serve in the military. And so he went from bricklaying to building houses, then to building office buildings, and today the Fisher family probably owns and operates more office space in Lower Manhattan than anyone else. And so he became very wealthy. But he always did things for the military, but he did them behind the scenes with no publicity. You may remember back in 1983 in Lebanon, a terrorist drove a truck-laden bomb into a Marine Corps barracks, and it killed 241 Marines. When I was in the military at that time, if I'd perished, my wife would have received an insurance payment of $12,000. And Zachary Fisher didn't think that was enough. And so he started an organization to try to increase that amount. When this happened in Lebanon with the 241 Marines, he sat down and wrote out a $10,000 check to every family that lost a Marine. A few years later, I think it was like 1987, aboard the USS Iowa, they had a gun turret that exploded and it killed 47 sailors. And Zachary Fisher sat down, wrote out a personal check for $25,000 to every family that lost a sailor in that. And then he did Alzheimer's research, a program. By the way, his wife did have Alzheimer's. And what I thought was spectacular, he would never leave her at home. So when he'd go out to open a new Fisher house, he'd always take her. And on military installations, we had to have the security police to be in the lobby at night to keep her from wandering out. But he would never leave her side. So later on, the insurance for the military increased substantially, up to about $200,000, and you could buy more as term insurance. And so they didn't need the additional money that he was putting in, and they were looking for something to do. And the Chief of Naval Operations invited Zachary Fisher and his wife Elizabeth to come to Bethesda Navy Hospital outside of Washington, D.C. And there Ms. Fisher met a young Marine with two small children that was living in his car in the parking lot. His wife was in the hospital. And the military pays for the medical care, but they don't provide anything else for the family. And Ms. Fisher asked this young man, "Why are you doing that?" And his response was, "I can't afford anything else." And she said, "That's not right." And those of us that are married know when your wife puts her finger in your chest and says, "That's not right," you're going to do something. And so that's how they started the Fisher House Foundation. They started on military installations. First three houses were for the Navy at Bethesda, Walter Reed for the Army, and Lackland Air Force Base for the Air Force. And so today that's grown to 91 Fisher houses, and number 92 is going to be Kansas City when it opens next month. But they just did so much for the military. But even in the military, and even later on in the VA, it was a long time before I'd ever even heard of the Fishers. Because they did all of that, they did it below the radar. But that's how it got started. Yeah.
Hey, Jim, I used to be a pin setter. How come I missed out on the rehab?
You used to be a pin setter?
Yes, I did.
A pin boy?
Yes.
You know, what's really funny is one of the adaptive sports we were teaching out there was golf. We had golf pros that came in the gymnasium, set up nets, and we were teaching the veterans how to play golf. And anyway, I took him back to show him the bowling alley, and he said, "My dad used to be a pin boy here." And I thought, boy, does that age all of us here. And then in 1970, basically, they put in the pin setters in there. But I think when you see this, if you'll take a look at the pictures, you'll be truly amazed at how nice it came out. Any other questions? Yes, yeah, Jane.
I have a question. One time when I was baking cookies at Fisher House.
And I want to salute Jan. I always tried to be down there when she was baking cookies. I have willpower for a lot of things, but cookies are not one that I have any willpower whatsoever for.
I attest to that, yes.
Well, can I have an extra one for my wife who will never see this cookie?
Well, I remember my team and I baking cookies one day, and this young mom and dad came into the smell of the cookies baking brought people into the kitchen.
Yeah.
We met lots of people. But this young couple, and he was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood. The mom had just had a baby that was in serious health condition, and they were staying there. So do they still do active military also?
Absolutely, and we changed the rules for active duty military. For the veterans, it's when the veteran is hospitalized. But for active duty military, it's when the wife is hospitalized or the children, because from Fort Leonard Wood, you'll get children that come here for Children's Hospital or Cardinal Glennon. They have special treatments that aren't offered anywhere else in the United States for children. And when we have active duty families there, many times the parent has to go on deployment or has to return to the base, and so the wife may be in BJC or with child in Children's Hospital, and her mom may be in the Fisher House with the other children. So whatever it takes to take care of the family. But we haven't had that many with the COVID process that we have right now. Yes, ma'am.
You must have an awful lot of volunteers. How do you recruit them? Are they mostly through veterans and their families, or?
Well, you've got one right here. 1.5, I'm sorry. People find out about it and they just want to help. And you know, we talk about the hospital, but what our families tell us is their greatest source of comfort is being there with other families going through the same thing. And so the volunteers that we have, like Jan bakes cookies, but sometimes she's like Mother Confessor. She'll listen to the stories and have empathy with what they're going through. And many times that means more than anything else. So in that brochure that I passed out, and there's more over here, you'll see the name for Venetia Brown. She's the Fisher House manager. And if you're ever interested in coming down to volunteer, give Venetia a call. Like I say, with the COVID, we're not having volunteers anywhere on the installation. But, you know, sometimes patients just need somebody to talk to them.
Another thing, what year did you say that was Bethesda and Walter Reed Army Hospital? I had surgery at Walter Reed Army Hospital when I was pregnant. My husband, we were stationed at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which was, I think, 40 miles away. He must have been in that at that time.
I think that was about, well, Mr. Fisher passed away in 1999. And so it was a little bit before that, but those were the first three. Yeah. Anyone else? Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, Frank?
When COVID opens up again, what sort of remote volunteer projects would you think that you would have? Not necessarily on board at the hospital, but from a remote standpoint, and what type of?
Well, we're always looking for somebody to help us with emailing and things like that. Ms. Brown would be the person to tell you what she can use. Like some people come out and we have a big storage area in the basement, just help us to organize the supplies. You know, people drop off things all the time there. And if you go on, there's our website that's on there. If you go on, it has a wish list. You know, like right now, hand sanitizers and gift cards, particularly. Many times we get veterans' families in that can't afford the gas to get home. And so we give them a gift card to purchase gasoline so that they can get home, or some nights, you know, even eating in the Fisher House gets old, and we have a gift card where they can go out and eat in a restaurant at a local facility there. Just whatever it takes to take care of them. Many, when we can have people back in a couple of times a month, we have bingo, and everybody shows up for bingo. And so if you can help with that, and we always have things that we pass out as small prizes. But if you just call Ms. Brown, she's on the trifold brochure right there. She'd be happy to talk to you.
So we could do that on an individual basis?
Sure, sure.
Basis type.
Yeah, don't need to talk to me. But she's the one that controls the volunteers in the house, because she always has the schedule of who's going to be cooking, whether it's cookies or meals or what have you. And so she arranges all of that. But, you know, I'd just tell you, when you go down there, and I'll let Jan answer this one, but when you can talk to the families, you find out how much they really appreciate just having you there. And, you know, they know somebody has contributed. You know, we have a golf tournament each year to raise money. We have personal donations. They know somebody else has contributed to that, and they truly appreciate it. Because let me tell you, what a lot of people don't know is, even though I spent 31 years in the military, I'm not eligible for VA health care. It's not for all veterans. The main criteria for receiving VA health care is that you have a disability associated with military service, or you've suffered a catastrophic injury or illness, or your annual income is equal to or less than the definition of low income. And I don't meet any of those, thank goodness. But, you know, they just appreciate anything that you can do for them. So I'd say, Jan, Bob, you could vouch for that, is whatever you do for them, they are just overwhelmed with your kindness.
And Venetia is very friendly.
Yeah, yeah,
She will help you.
yeah. But our bottom line is, whatever it takes to take care of the family, we'll do. We'll go talk about the extra mile. We'll do it. Whether it's overflow hotel rooms or off-hours transportation or purchasing special food or something for babies that we don't have. When you walk into that house, and what's really funny, it still amazes me to this day, is when people find out they're going to come be staying at Jefferson Barracks. They think they're going to be staying in an old Army barracks sleeping on a cot. And when they see the interior of this house, and the little card that you see right here has pictures of the interior of that house, they're just blown away. They think it's Jefferson Barracks Army, and that's where they're going to be staying. But it's just wonderful.
I always thought it looked like a Hampton Inn.
Well, a lot of people say it's more like a 5-star hotel. I can tell you, it's a cut above a Hampton Inn for sure.
The kitchen is to die for.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Frank, so much for inviting me. I truly appreciate it, and I'll stick around. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Terrific.
And
If I may